The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Off the Wall with Eric Lenaburg. I am Eric, the doctor of baseball, and we are on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Today we've got a very special guest with us, Seth Swirsky. Seth is an author of the baseball trilogy, starting with the baseball letters, and we'll talk about his 3 best-selling books. He's also written 21 Steps to a Happier Depression, and he's a singer-songwriter who was nominated for a Grammy for Taylor Dayne's hit, Tell It to My Heart. And who among my listeners, including myself, hasn't sung along that song while driving? Seth, welcome today.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I always enjoy talking with you. You're a fascinating guy. And I want to ask you right off the bat. I remember a few years ago you sang the national anthem. And was that at Wrigley Field?
Yes, it was.
Okay, now, how did that come about? Obviously, music got you into that position, or did it? How did it come about you were asked to sing there?
Well, it turns out that a fan of my solo records, I put out, solo CDs under my name, and I also have a band called The Red Button. And we kind of do very Beatles-type songs that I write, write with my partner in The Red Button. And it turns out that, one of the announcers for the Cubs is a fan. So we got on the phone, and he said, "Hey, do you want to sing the national anthem?" And I thought, I always like to say yes to every challenge, and then deal with it. But I like to really, say, I haven't climbed that mountain before, and I'm going to say yes to it. I automatically said yes to things like that. And I got off the phone with him. It was May of 2011. And he said, pick a game, pick a date. And he gave me a couple of choices, and it was August, late August, and there was a game between the Braves and the Cubs. I thought, hey, that's a good game to be at. Late August, good weather, the whole thing. And I got off the phone thinking, wait a minute. He said the national anthem. He didn't say the 7th inning stretch where it doesn't matter. So right. I basically sang the national anthem every time I was in the car with the kids. I mean, they got so sick of the national anthem, you have no idea. And by the time I got to Wrigley, I had taken my son, Luke, who was 9 years old at the time, because I wanted him to see it, and took a camcorder, the whole thing, and he was going to film it. And I'm telling you, 5 minutes before I get on the field, I just forgot all the words. I blanked. I just thought, wow, am I really doing this? This is like, oh my God, am I really going to do this thing? Anyway, there was no time to really get into it, to think about it deeper. And I got to the third baseline, and I'm looking out over the stands, and it's a lot of people. I've never really seen that many people in front of me. And I just started with it. And I'll tell you, this is the interesting part of the story. When the reverb of being in a stadium with a microphone, when it started to hit the fans and then come back, or hit the stands and come back, it felt very comfortable to me because I'm a recording artist. I'm used to reverbs and different sounds and being excited by that. And the moment I heard that, I felt so comfortable that I forgot about, do I know this line? Do I know that line? And I just had an adrenaline rush, a great sense of confidence. And I sang it I felt real good singing it, and very straight. I don't do any vocal gymnastics. I'm not a good enough singer to do that kind of stuff. And I don't like it. I don't like when I hear it that way. But it turns out I sang it very straight. I got a nice applause. It was a filled stadium, the whole thing. And I'm coming back. They escorted me and my son back to the seats there. And as I went to the seats that the Cubs got me, all these people were like patting me on the back. But that's the way the anthem should be done. Make it about the song. That was cool. And it was just an incredibly gratifying thing, unbelievably gratifying, amazingly gratifying. And I was just so happy that my 9-year-old was there. He took a film of it, and the Cubs gave me a film of it, and you could go see it on YouTube right now. Just type in Seth Swirsky sings the national anthem. Yeah.
I'm going to do that. It's funny, I had Zoe Deschanel was on the show a couple of years ago, my other show. Mm-hmm. She talked about singing the anthem at the World Series, 2010 at AT&T.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
She's a recording artist also.
Oh, yeah.
The reverb got to her. She said it almost threw her off to where she blew the whole thing.
That's a fascinating thing. I never heard that, and it's interesting that you're telling me that because that's the thing that put me in an incredible comfort zone. I was just like, wow. I just felt, this is amazing.
Yeah, it was just the opposite for her, and she started thinking, as I remember, she said she started thinking, there's 40,000 people here, and they're hearing me right now, but I'm hearing a different me and the echo and so forth. It really got her panic-stricken for a moment, but she pulled it off. She did a great job.
Oh, that's great. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Now, you and I originally met 22 years ago when the baseball letters came out, and I remember talking to you and doing an article, and I want to ask you a similar question that I asked you that day. I want to ask you about something to write home about. Now, the baseball letters came from your desire to connect with a lot of old-time players, and you got great response. It turned out to be a great book. The same with Every Picture Tells a Story. But then how did you come up with the idea for something to write home about?
Well, I was fascinated. I still was as interested as hearing from people that had stories, personal stories, told in their own handwriting. And the passion continued for me. Baseball Letters was written, or, I put that whole thing together. It wasn't just current players it was mostly players that I found that were living from the early part of the century, 1908, 1912, 1918, and then all the way through the 30s and 40s and 50s and some of the guys I grew up with. And that was amazing. And then I just thought, I remember thinking, Eric, every picture tells a story. I remember thinking to myself, you could ask a major league pitcher, you could say to him, it was the fifth inning of a game in September of 1943. And he'll tell you, and if you tell him the batter, he'll tell you exactly what pitch he threw. Pitchers are absolutely, it's uncanny. They remember every pitch, where it went, what it was. So that turned me on. So I made the second book, again, in letter form, where they answered my questions in their own handwriting. But that's how it became Every Picture Tells a Story. That I needed to tell you before I got to something to write home about. Why did I do that one? Because I thought there are a lot of people out there that have fantastic baseball stories, like the pitchers that I got for the second book or the old-timers that I got for Baseball Letters in the first book. And I thought, let me get some of those people. And so I remember seeing Paul McCartney on TV in seventh inning stretch, and he's at Yankee Stadium, and they start playing I Saw Her Standing There, one of the Beatles' first big hits. And he's mouthing the words to it. So I wrote to him, and I got FedEx back I opened it up, and in his handwriting, Dear Seth, yeah, I love going to baseball games, and when I heard that song, first of all, when he says the word yeah, like yeah, yes. This is Paul is basically wrote me a 2-paragraph letter all about that question. And then I wrote to the president at the time, George W. Bush, in the White House, and 3 pages came back to me. I looked in my mailbox. It said, the White House. And other interesting things from people that didn't necessarily play the game. There was a girl named Elizabeth Wrigley Field without a hyphen. She's a freshman at New York University. So I found her, and she wrote to me what it was like to go through life with that name. And mixed in with the Sean Greens and the Pedro Martinezes, I got a lot of great players as well. But that's what turned me on about something to write home about. People that had fantastic stories but didn't play.
Yeah, and I remember being very moved by the letter from Martin Luther King. How did you stumble across that? He had been dead for 40-plus years.
Well, it was actually Martin Luther King's photographer, his personal photographer. And Martin Luther King had given a sermon that day, and then he said to his photographer, hey, come on back to the house. Come on back to the house. I want you to see what I'm doing with my kids today and just hang out. And the photographer was taking a bunch of pictures of him, and he took out a baseball, and him and his eldest son started playing baseball in the backyard. And all of these fantastic shots that I'd never seen before of Martin Luther King Jr. pitching to his son. And it just goes to show you the power of baseball, that one of the great civil rights leaders in the midst of such change that he was making happen, he could relax on a Sunday playing baseball. You know, or Paul McCartney.
A better way to relax.
That's right. I mean, it's just amazing there's so few things in life that we can all jump into that same pool, that we can say, hey, this all feels good. This is great. You know, and one of those things is baseball.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, we're going to take a commercial break here in a second, but let's make a deal. The next time I come see you, I'm going to bring my glove, and let's you and I have a catch out in the yard.
I would love to do that.
Absolutely. All right, this is Eric Lenaburg, the Doctor of Baseball. We will be right back. All right, we are back with Seth Swirsky and having a great conversation with Seth here. And if you haven't read any of his books, I encourage you to go out and find them. The Baseball Letters, Every Pitcher Tells a Story, Something to Write Home About, and 21 Days to a Happier Depression. We're going to talk a little bit more about a documentary that Seth has done, and also his band, The Red Button. I've listened to their music. I love it, and I would bet a lot of you will too. So again, Seth, welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, now we were talking about the last of your baseball trilogy, Something to Write Home About. In that book, as you mentioned, there's a letter from Paul McCartney. Now, you're the only person I know who has met all three of the surviving Beatles. And what I'd like to hear is two things. I'm sure our listeners want to hear this. How did you meet George Harrison, and what did you have in common at the time? Let's talk about that first.
Well, I was writing songs. I was under contract with Warner Chappell Music, writing songs for different recording artists, Celine Dion, Air Supply. You know, a lot of artists don't write their own songs. So that's what I did as a profession. And I had a song that was out with an artist named Taylor Dane, a song called Tell It to My Heart, which was shooting up to the top of the charts. So it was obviously a very thrilling occasion. And I was in Los Angeles. It was right around the time that Taylor Dane came out with Tell It to My Heart. So George Harrison made a comeback with his song, Got My Mind Set on You. And every week on the charts, I would see my song leap ahead of his and his song leap ahead of mine. I wrote the song for Taylor Dane. He didn't write that song, but it didn't matter. It was George Harrison. Anyway, I'm in Los Angeles, and I was my contract was up with my publisher, but I was having a good year. So, you know, they were looking to re-sign me, and they took me out to dinner one night, and it was, you know, I felt wonderful about it. You know, I felt like I was, you know, really being, you know, like being paid attention to, and like that we want to re-sign this guy, just like a ball player, you know.
Right.
And one of the vice presidents from the company whispered in my ear. She said, you know, George Harrison is eating in the private room. Do you want me to introduce you? I know him. And I said, if you introduce me to George Harrison, I will sign any contract you put in front of me. I don't care. So she takes me back there, and I walk in, and there's George Harrison. And she comes up, he gets up, and I walk over to him. I'll never forget it. And she said, Seth Swirsky, this is George Harrison. And he goes, hi, how are you? I said, George, I got to tell you that I was listening to your song today at my hotel. It just happened to come on, the song I Need You. You don't realize how much I need you. And he goes, well, that was from The Help, wasn't it? Not Help, The Help. So I corrected him. I said, Help, yes. and he had a laugh over it. I said, I have to tell you, because I'm particularly thrilled right now because I have a song out that's you and me were jockeying for position up the charts. My song is called Tell It to My Heart. He goes, oh, my son Danny told me about that song. That's wonderful. That's fantastic. And I'm feeling like, wow, George Harrison is, acknowledging my music. And then he said,
I want to walking in the clouds for a long time.
Oh, my God. And it gets better. He goes, well, let me introduce you to the people around the table. So I said, okay. And I was just so fixed on him. And he said, this is Jeff. This is Tom. This is Roy. And that's Bob. That was the first meeting of the Traveling Wilburys.
Oh, my gosh.
And I just, no one knew about it.
Now I'm speechless.
Yeah, right? Okay, so that was like crazy. And then here's the crazy part. I go back to New York. I was living in New York at the time, but I did traveling out to L.A. quite a bit to write songs and things like that. But I went back out. Tell It to My Heart was nominated for a Grammy Award. And I came back to Los Angeles, and I was hanging out at one of the after parties after the Grammys, and I was early to the party. I was just hanging out there, And I looked up at the front of the restaurant that the party was going to be at. And there was George Harrison at the window there by himself. So he turns around, he starts walking towards the middle of the room, and I kind of walked that way too. And I looked up at him, we both stopped, and he said, Seth, how you doing? And I'm thinking, he remembered my name? This guy's met 10 million people. Come on. So that was insane. And then I said to him, hey, George, because, when you're a songwriter, you got to get on records any which way you can. You got to, you stop people, and those days you handed them a cassette. You do anything you can to write with them, to do whatever. But I just remember thinking to go for it all the time. And I said, hey, George, listen, what are you doing Friday? You want to write a song together? Because I'm thinking, what could he say? If he says yes, then I would be writing a song with George Harrison. Now, come on. But just to ask him and have him contemplate it was enough for me. And he said, that took a lot of guts to ask me that. He goes, but I'm writing with Bobby on Friday, and then I'm leaving town. So I'm thinking, Swirsky was turned down for Dylan. I'll take it.
That's not a bad second place.
Right.
Now, let me ask you this, and I actually know the story, but I know my listeners are going to enjoy this. How did you meet Paul McCartney?
Well, I was at my gym. I usually go Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I had no reason to be there on a Tuesday. I don't think I've ever been on a Tuesday. I just happen to have that schedule kind of over the years. But I happen to be there. And I'm doing sit-ups in the gym. And you know what sit-ups look like. You go up and you go down, right? And I'm going up on one of the sit-ups, and I look, and on one of the running machines is Paul McCartney. My brain took over. It didn't think. I went into automatic pilot, and I'm not a crazy fan. I've been around many famous people for a very long time, but I'm a deep appreciator, and Paul McCartney to me is just about the top of everything. You could put me in a room with, even when I was 10 years old or 15 years old, you could have put me in a room with Mickey Mantle or Joe Namath, and that would have been quite thrilling. But Paul McCartney's another story. So I walk over. I see that his running machine next to him is empty, and I got on it. And as I'm going on the machine, I'm glaring over with my eyes. I didn't want him to see I was looking. And I see that he's running at over 7 miles an hour. He's also at the time like 68. And I'm thinking, geez, that's fast. That's amazing. No wonder he does 3.5-hour concerts without stopping. This guy's in incredible shape. So I'm scrambling in my mind. I'm thinking, God, if I could ask him any question, I've got to think of somebody. I did a documentary called Beatles Stories. I interviewed a lot of people in their world that they knew. So I was thinking, who did I interview that would impress him if I get a chance to talk with him, which the odds weren't great. And I'm thinking, well, I interviewed Brian Wilson and Graham Nash and George Martin and all these people. But would he take to that? I'm scrambling in my mind. Finally, I see that he's ramping his machine down, and I slowly did too. And I turn, and he's turned facing me. He looked at me. He turned his body to be face to face with me, and we weren't 10 inches apart. And he gave me a look that said, okay, I know you're a Beatle guy. I can tell by your haircut. I mean, he really could tell. I'm telling you, there was a vibe in the air that you just know those things. He gave me a second of his time. He knew that I probably had a decent question for him or something, and he was going to give me that. And he turned, and I just said, you know, Paul, or Sir Paul, I called him at the time, as, you know, I think he had just been knighted. I said, I have to tell you, I've done a documentary called Beatles Stories, and one of the people I interviewed was Norman Smith, your earliest recording engineer. And it was amazing to me what a wonderful guy he was. This is a man that was in his mid-80s when I interviewed him, and he just told me stories about every single one of the songs. He was the Beatles' main engineer. He made their sound. Well, I hit gold because Paul looked at me. It was shocking. He just said, "You interviewed Norman Smith?" Norman Smith. He goes, "We just loved Norman." And I'm thinking, when Paul McCartney says we, he means the Beatles. We means the Beatles, which is amazing that he's telling me that. Oh, my God. Anyway, so we're now talking about it, and now a crowd starts to form around us. Like a little symposium. Here I am with a tank top on. Paul's got a tank top. I was hoping, you never know what's going to happen in life. And we just, you know, it was just an incredible, incredible experience. And then I've met Ringo. I have a, you know, great photograph with Ringo and I. We met, you know, it's just an honor to meet them, you know.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I love walking through your house and just looking at the photos. I could do that for hours.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the great documentary you did, Beatles Stories, you have a sequel, correct? And when can we expect it?
Yes, I'm making one now called Beatles Stories Volume 2, and I'm hoping it's out next year sometime, next year in the fall. But it's just it's like I did with the trilogy of baseball books. It's ongoing stories about the Beatles from people that really had an interaction with them, not people that love their music and just want to tell you that. That's not that hard to get. But I found a great story in the backwoods of Louisiana. I was just on Miami Beach. Another guy had a fantastic story. I'm just telling you, I find these stories and I put them together into 2-minute little segments, and I hope to give people about, 40 or 50 stories that they haven't heard before.
Yeah, that's great. And now when you say next year, you're talking 2019?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And
we're going to be wrapping up here, but I have...
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say a shameless plug. If anybody wants to see the first movie, it's on Amazon, and again called Beatles Stories, and I think they would enjoy it.
Absolutely, I know everybody I know enjoyed it. I certainly did. I've watched it more than once, believe me.
Oh, thank you so much.
You and I have been friends for a few years, and I know you to be a warm and compassionate man, except when you're playing fantasy baseball, that is. But let me ask you this question. In life, I'm not talking about sports, but in life, what is your reply to people who say nice guys finish last?
Well, I don't believe that. I just don't believe that. I think that, you got to do everything you can and everything that you do in life to increase your chances of winning, because I like to go to bed at night knowing that I did everything I could to do the best that I could. And that's why I go through life with absolutely not one single regret. I don't look back on anything I've ever done to regret it, because this is the point. And it was a big revelation to me, but this is the point. We make decisions at the time, but later on we look back at that and it's easy to say, why didn't I do that? Because you don't remember all the things, all the calculations it took to actually make the decision. You're always making the best decision you can at the time, but you never give yourself credit for it. And the way you just mentioned fantasy baseball, just for the fun of it, I'm going to give you a way that I think about things. Every time I don't know whether I'm going to start, if I have 2 first basemen and they're both great, how do I know which one I'm going to start? I'm going to do the best I can calculating. It might take me an hour to figure it out. But I know when I pick one and the other one that day hits a home run, but he's on my bench, and then the one that I actually rostered did nothing, I don't get mad at myself, because I know that I had a lot of decisions to make to get to what I thought would be best. And it's the same thing with things in life. We make the calculations and hopefully learn from why that may have been the wrong calculation. It's the only way, it's the only formula, what I'm saying now, to live life in the moment. People talk about living in the now. The only way to live in the now is to not hammer yourself for anything that happened in the past. It's to understand that you did the best you could at the time.
Wow, that's a great answer, and I hope everyone listening takes that to heart. I know I will. Seth, thank you again for being here, and I know you'll join us again in the future. This is Eric Lenaburg, Off the Wall. We will be back again soon with another episode, and in the meantime, have a great week wherever you may be.